Hi, this is Richard Murray. I am here doing part two of Parking Lot Theology. The last session that we did was good, and there was a good response to it, so I want to keep honoring the process, and let's just see if we can have some fun with this. I do a lot of my best thinking in the car, and I come and this is where I meditate, so it's kind of my sanctum. So, but anyway, and I also apologize because I'm not savvy. I'm not computer savvy or video savvy. I keep looking at the screen instead of at the camera. So bear with me. Someone emailed me, a friend did, and said you're not looking at the camera. But it's hard because it's just a little dot, and I don't know why. But at any rate, I'll do my best, and we'll see how we do. The last time we met, we talked about the knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And we talked about what that was in the garden and what went wrong, and basically that each tree in the garden represents a different perspective on God. That the tree of the knowledge of good and evil sees God as being the author of good and evil, whereas the tree of life sees God only as the author of life and goodness and blessing and virtue. So, and then we also talked about how to escape from God, who is perfect. You know, Adam walked in the garden and saw God clearly. He understood him. You know, he walked, maybe not perfectly, but he understood him, and he walked with him in the cool of the garden. But then the moment that he believed a lie about him, a lie about his essential nature, when that happened, Adam fell, and he fell from fellowship with the Lord. And, you know, that's the Hebrew for death, the Hebrew conception of death. Really has to do with death to relationship. You're no longer connected vibrantly to what you were connected to. So it doesn't have to be just physical death, but it can be death to relationships, and we all know how that feels. But at any rate, the point is to escape God. If you're going to escape God's beauty, you got to lie to yourself and say He's not beautiful. And the way that you do that is to engage in the knowledge of good and evil, which then hides behind this big issue of God being sovereign. God is sovereign. He is the author. Nothing can be created without Him. You know, nothing can happen without His approval. So He is the author of evil. And that's why the Old Testament is full of passages where it says, I create light, I create dark, I create good, I create evil. Shall there be evil in a city and the Lord's not done it? Well, you never hear Jesus talk that way. And never. God doesn't create evil. God creates good. God creates men who misuse their free will to create evil, and that's the way that it happens. And we end up blaming God, which is exactly what Adam and Eve did. You know, the first thing they did after they believed the lie about God, what did they do? They hid in shame, thinking that they needed to be scared of Him, that He was going to wrathfully smite them and destroy Him, because now they knew evil, they knew good and evil, and they knew why God might love them, that He also might smite them. So that justified them running away. Then when God finds them and is trying to relate to them, all they can do is blame. Adam blames, Eve blames the snake. Adam blames Eve, and God. Adam actually blamed God. He said, it was the woman you gave me. All they could do was blame. And ultimately that's all we do when we're not in the Spirit. We either blame God or we blame others for evil. And we usually, there's an implicit accusation in there that God is the true party at fault. Because He allowed something to happen, and we're going to get into that in future sessions. Does God allow evil? But I want to keep this short today. But I want to describe the knowledge of good and evil as a glop, G-L-O-P. That's just a mess. And when that glop happened, then their image of God changed from God being life to God being life and death, or to put it another way, Satan. The rebel, who was even a rebel in the garden as the snake, conjoined to God's image through the knowledge of good and evil, so that this glop is all that the Old Testament saints could see of God. They believed that God was both good and evil, and that Satan, and their literature bears this out, they believe Satan was an obedient angel. The Old Testament Judaism does not see Satan as an enemy of God. They see Satan as an obedient death angel, just God's official minister of wrath. And that's really the way modern Calvinism does too, except that Calvinism does see Satan more like a rabid dog, but that he still is on God's chain, and that God's just directing him, God is sicking him on who He wants to bite, with wrath. But the concept is the same, that everything comes from God's hand. But here comes Jesus in the New Testament and separates them out. He differentiates God's voice from the devil's voice. See, the veil, in Hebrews it talks about the veil being torn. When the veil was torn, then we can see clearly into the heavenly realities. And see, but we assume that there's just one voice behind the veil, and that Satan is God's angry voice. All right, and that's the voice we hear. So when we hear God loving us behind the veil in the Old Testament, they would say, oh, that's Yahweh. But then when they would hear God wrathfully hating them, they would say, well, that's Yahweh too. So Satan is his left hand, Yahweh's the right hand. They come together, and that's their image of God. But Jesus comes in the New Testament and the word that I want to use is differentiates. He differentiates the image of God from the image of Satan and shows God to be Jesus. And Jesus shows his Father to be the Father of lights, love, and goodness, and only light, love, and goodness. And Satan is the God of death and destruction. And I don't mean God in the sense of Jesus being God in a little g. Because Paul said the God of this world, little g, is Satan, all right? And but he's not a permanent God. He's a temporal God till the death element is purged completely out of this creation. Now, Jesus has already done that in the heavenly places. He's waiting for his church to rise up and purge death out of the equation. So once that happens and death is gone, Satan will just, whatever happens to Satan will happen, but he won't have any authority. He doesn't really have any authority now. We just have, because we neglect our so great a salvation, he moves in areas, he just moves in fumes. He's operating on fumes of our neglect. All right, but he doesn't have any real power anymore. But when we default to him, then he can come in and do damage. All right, but this is good enough for this session. I want to take us from the garden up and just kind of be free flowing with it, and just get this idea that the whole point is that the garden, the tree of life, is God is life. But the tree of the knowledge of good and evil brings life and death together and then projects that onto God. So as we grow with Jesus, we come and we differentiate death from life, hate from love, and then we get a pure image of who God is. And Jesus is the full and express image of God. Thanks. Hope you enjoyed it.